Good morning to you. I have a very long name, but you can call me Thaatch. I'm actually from Monash University, Malaysia campus, and I'm a law lecturer at the School of Business, and I teach business law and taxation. So the title of my paper is actually using the researcher skill development framework to construct marking rubrics for law assessments. Okay, basically, it is a practice paper. I'm very new to RSD, so I've only attempted using it since last year, early last year. And the paper is basically a documentation of how I used the framework in constructing two kinds of marking rubrics. The first was for an assignment for in-semester assessments for the subject called International Trade Law, which is a core unit under the Master of International Business, or the MIB program, in Monash University, Malaysia. And the second rubric was actually constructed for a conference, an undergraduate conference, which was very interdisciplinary because it was organized by the School of Arts and Social Sciences with a collaboration with the School of Business. So the conference itself was on gender, and it was called Gender Works, Dialogue and Action Across Our Differences. So I actually used the RSD framework to construct the marking rubric for the conference papers. So why and how the RSD framework? Basically because Monash has implemented RSD framework, but it has not been widely used in Monash, Malaysia. And so when I came across it, I felt that it was a very good framework, and also because it enabled me to align it to the learning outcomes for the unit, and also to incorporate the key assessment criteria for law assignments, particularly for those law units that were taken by non-law postgraduate students. So it was used to create an objective marking criterion for both the unit, and as I had experienced it using it for the unit, I then proceeded to use it for the conference, as I was one of the conveners of the conference. So in a nutshell, it's sort of something that I've just started on. So there is still a need to obtain student feedback and reflection on how effective it has been so far. So some of the information that I give you later on is not exactly through surveys and all that, but just informal chats with students to obtain feedback. Okay, so that's my paper in a nutshell. So why the RSD? Very simply because I attended the RSD workshop. I suppose it's a simple answer. And I found the RSD framework to be a very good framework because I had finished my PhD and graduated from Monash University in 2014. So as a PhD student, I found that putting research into a framework was quite difficult. And I come from a law background. I have a degree in law and a master's in law, but my PhD was actually done at the School of Arts and Social Sciences. So I had to learn social science methodologies very quickly and try to incorporate that in my research. So having experienced that, when I came back to teaching, I realized that one of the key issues was how do you actually teach research skills to students, especially undergraduates. I attended the workshop. It was as if someone had just opened the light and showed me the way. It's like, so what I found was the RSD was a very non-prescriptive framework that provided a structure through which a higher education academic, especially someone like me who's an early career academic, in order to teach research skills to both undergraduate and postgraduate students. So the first unit that I was told to teach was the international trade law. Now, I found the RSD malleable enough to incorporate into both assessment design as well as key marking criteria. But there were a couple of hurdles that I had to face. First hurdle was, can the RSD be used for law assessments? And secondly, the students were not law students. So they were business students. And so the question was, how do I align RSD to law-based assessment criteria and legal research, as well as learning outcomes for business students? So this is some of the challenges that I faced. So what I found is there was a gap, a practice gap, incorporating research skills in the whole MIB itself, the whole program. And of course, this translated to it not being used for international trade law. The reason is because the previous focus has always been on law assessments from a problem-based approach rather than a research-based one. So problem-based teaching approach basically uses a legal reasoning method called IRAC for short, or issue, rule, application, and conclusion. It's a very linear method where you need to identify the legal issues and then find the relevant laws and then apply the laws to the issues and then make a conclusion. So the purpose of IRAC is to inculcate legal reasoning skills and train students to think like a lawyer. But I found this a bit strange because the MIB students are not law students. So the question was, why were we training them to think like lawyers when they are not going to be? So with that, I found there was a tension here because the current approach to teaching law for law students is problem-based, or the literature said they called it environmentalist or the contextual approach. So how is this relevant to business? So in that sense, the second point is that there was also a gaps in incorporating a research framework which is relevant for postgraduate students undertaking a law unit. So which means because they're postgraduates, I would have thought that there was a need for a higher standard of research-informed curriculum and assessment. So how to fill this gap? The first step was I had to answer the question, how is law relevant to business students? And the second step was to determine to what extent is research relevant to postgraduate business students and try to bring these two together. So how was the RSD utilized? For the unit itself, which was international trade law, the first thing that I did was I infused both legal and research skills into assessment questions and criteria, as well as marking rubrics. So the process of that was very much organic because it all started out with Monash University Malaysia librarians and learning advisors. They were crucial stakeholders and they assisted me continuously, gave me suggestions and feedback. And this ongoing dialogue between the librarians, the learning advisors and myself has kept the assessment rubric very fluid and flexible. So it has changed over the last 3 semesters. Also, there was attempts made to align the RSD facets to the IRAC method and also to sort of incorporate a more humanities, social science type of essay writing criteria. So I can just show you the marking rubric. I don't think you can read it. This is the current one, which is being used. It's actually 2 pages. I still feel it's too long. It initially was 3 pages, but I've tried to bring it down to 2. So I'll just give you, well, this is the melt, how I tried to sort of put both IRAC and the RSD together. So the first facet on embark and clarify, I thought fit in really well with the first step for IRAC, which is identifying the legal issue. So the students have to embark and clarify and figure out what is the issue in the first place. And the second one is find and generate, which sort of fit in really well with identifying the relevant rules and rules, by rules of course I mean the laws. So this is the research part of it, and they need to figure out what laws would fit in with those legal issues. And the third, which is evaluate and reflect, fit in quite well with the application part, which is applying the rules to the legal issue. And of course, analyze and synthesize sort of fit in with the last section of IRAC, which is to ascertain the conclusion. So even though IRAC is quite linear, I found that the RSD was malleable enough to fit into that linear sort of thinking. And the last one, of course, organize and manage and communicate and apply, I found was useful because in any law essay writing, you would need to structure the answer, link your arguments, as well as do your legal citations and referencing. So in that way, I was able to use the RSD framework in the marking rubric quite easily, actually. So by using RSD and IRAC method in the marking rubrics, the students were encouraged to use both research and legal skills, and also found that the students who used the rubric scored better marks for the in-semester assessments. So I believe that for the future, I still need to do quite a bit in terms of measuring student feedback, because at the moment now it is all based on informal feedback. The second plan, of course, is for curriculum design. That means redesigning the whole unit itself, and also to use the RSD framework in order to create a more research-based unit rather than a very law-focused one. So the last bit on the Gender Works conference, this was basically a conference that I was convening. It was interdisciplinary in nature. It was on gender and law themes. It had a diverse section of students coming in, but they were mostly law students. There were also students who came from gender studies, engineering, and even medicine, which was quite unusual. So because of the diverse nature of the students, there was a need to construct a very neutral rubric. So I actually used the RSD, but this time, of course, it was not aligned to a law problem-based approach. It was more based on social science criteria in research assignments. So what I found is that the RSD provided objective criteria, and we had 3 judges who marked the papers. And during the moderation of the papers, we found that the marks were allocated quite fairly due to the objective criterion. So we were able to overcome this problem of having a strict marker and a very lenient marker. So that is something that was very positive during the conference. So this is just an example of the rubric. Okay, so basically, in conclusion, the paper that I've written is basically a reflection on my experience experimenting, I'll use the word experimenting, on the RSD for 2 marking rubrics. First was the Masters in International Business postgraduate unit, and secondly for the undergraduate conference. So what I found is that RSD can be used for law-based assessment, which can also incorporate legal methods of analysis and legal essay writing. But it does require a shift in thinking in terms, not just for the students, also for the law academics as well. Because what I found is that my other colleagues in the law department still don't understand how the RSD can be used in that sense, because they still strongly feel that a more legal approach is better. So I'm still trying to address that. The other thing that I can conclude is it worked really well with the conference papers, and I think this would maybe be something that would be used in future conferences as well, especially when you have more than one person judging the papers. So the last thing that I want to say is my next step, the future, is for me to obtain more student feedback and also use the RSD for curriculum design. With that, thank you very much.